All right, want to welcome you to another Let's Talk program where we talk about some of the current events that has happened throughout the week. And before we get started, we're going to have a word of prayer. And if we can ask Elder Tracy, if you could just give us a word of prayer at this time.
We're praying, Father in heaven, thank you so much, dear Lord, for your kindness and your goodness. I ask now, dear God, that you will lead us and guide us in this conversation, dear God. We recognize, dear Lord, there are many things that are plaguing our society, many things, dear Lord, that are rocking us to and fro. But we ask now, dear God, you give us divine direction, dear Lord, asking for your Holy Spirit's guidance and that you allow this conversation to aid, dear Lord, in the betterment of all of us, dear Father. Prepare us for your second coming. Give us awareness, dear Lord, of what your word says. Give us awareness, dear Lord, of what's going on around us, dear Father, that we may be effective and be used, dear Lord, in these last days. In Jesus' name we do pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. And so this has been a really tough week. And there's a lot that we can really talk about. And I know last night got some texts from some friends and even church members of course, iconic actor, African-American actor, Chadwick Boseman, who passed away. He lost his battle to colon cancer. And of course, this was a big surprise to many of us because he kept this a secret. And I want to just touch on it if we can. What are your thoughts on the passing of Chadwick Boseman? And so we want to start off with Pastor Sai.
Yes, as you say, Chadwick Boseman was very iconic in the African American world, especially, just doing very big films. Many of us know that he did the Black Panther film, and it was amazing to see because there were so many people over the course of weeks, months, and even years, just lining up to see that film and excited for when it came out. And what that showed America is that, that one, Black people do definitely support their own because it was an all Black cast. But then two, of how this, young man portrayed himself in this film and what it represented. I've watched so many different Marvel films, so many different films, that are similar to Black Panther, and it was touching to see just the depth it went, and how it portrayed the story, and to learn of how he passed away, just 4 years battling cancer. So when I learned it, I was following it. So at stage 3, he was diagnosed, and then it progressed, and then boom, we get the news last night. So it tells me that before the big films that he was, playing in, that he was battling this cancer and didn't even know it. And I don't know, like there's just so many emotions that just well up within me just because, I just think about, cancer and what it does to the body. And for this individual, for Chadwick Boseman to have so much energy from what we saw to put out these big films, it's remarkable. And I think about, just the work of Christ. He knew that he was, going to die at some point, or, his life was going to expire at some point, but it didn't stop him from still carrying out his mission and still, doing what he had come to do. And it's inspirational to many people around the world that no matter what life brings us, no matter what challenges come our way, that if we have our minds set on something, that we can fight until the bitter end. And last night was his end. It was his sunset. And I'm touched. He has made an impact in my life, just from watching movies like 42 and Marshall. And I hope that I can live a life that, continuously won't stop, can't stop, in whatever mission that I put my mind to it. So yeah, I'm sad about what happened.
Elder Tracy, what's your take? What's your thoughts on the passing of Chadwick Boseman?
It's very tough. it hit me very hard, because when considering someone suffering, you start going back and asking yourself, what were you doing during that time? And just to know he's been battling this for 4 years, and he was able to film. He was able to promote. He was the face of this movie that was the highest grossing Marvel movie in history. He was able to go out on talk shows and do all these things, and he's going through chemotherapy. He's going through countless surgeries. He's fighting privately. And then not only does he do that, but then he turns around, he goes to St. Jude's Hospital campus, and he delivers toys to children who are suffering from cancer, and sat down with 2 young boys who didn't even get a chance to live long enough to see the premiere of Black Panther in February 2018. And I'm looking at this, and I'm just looking at the strength of someone who is able to continue with their day-to-day, then take it upon themselves to go in their personal life and exert the same type of energy and fervor, because they truly believe that individuals are entitled to have a better future than what they have. And so to sit down with children, smile with them, try to bring them joy, knowing inside what's happening to you. And I was able to witness my wife's aunt suffer from colon cancer, and it was extremely aggressive. It just, completely draining. And to see how much he was able to do with that illness. And I guess what really strikes me is, it's tough to deal with this, but during the time when this movie came out in February of 2018, we have been suffering under an oppressive regime in this country. And it was the moment that this movie was released that Black people, and I can't say all Black people, because obviously we have some different kinds this past week, but most Black people just felt so empowered of a place that we could call home, a place, even though it's fictional, a place that we could call home, a place that we could look at and say, you know what, we are better than they brand us. We actually do have the ability to excel if we're not being systemically oppressed, and if we're not being ostracized and denied. And to be the face of that, to be the individual who inspires that type of hope, and then to actually leave that fictional place we call Wakanda and come to Oakland, California, and say, we're actually going to come back here and we're going to try and set up some technological buildings and opportunities for young people. And to know that it wasn't just a movie, but then he took that into his personal life to go and try and give that hope to young people and give that encouragement. And then to see, and we may get to this later on, I'm not sure, but then to see someone from Oakland rise up from those same ashes, from the times of the riots, from the time of the Black Panther movement here in America, and be vetted as and accept the nominations of vice presidential candidate. It's just it's a huge swing in the pendulum. And as I look at the life of Chadwick Boseman, it's unfortunate for me, I didn't know him beyond all of his work. I don't know his catalog of work. Apparently he wrote a lot of plays, he directed, he spent some time behind the lens before he became the face of this huge franchise, and obviously 42 and some other things that James Brown, I believe he did his life story as well. But just not knowing that beforehand and looking at the work he has done, it seems as though it was so short, even though he's done so much so quickly. It was so short. And I'll say this just as my last point. He was the inspirational hope of, we will give what we can to others. We will try to have this idea of working together, coming together, again, through that portrayal of T'Challa. But now he's dead. And it's almost as though you say to yourself, is that even possible? Particularly looking at the environment we're living in now, is that even possible? And so I'm deeply saddened, very, very just troubled by it. I can't imagine what his friends and his family, his wife, I can't imagine what they're going through this time. But a Howard graduate, and really just impressed with what he was able to do, and just hope that the impact he has had on those young lives and ours will continue to transcend even during these most difficult and dark times.
Yeah, this has been just a crazy, crazy year. The death of Kobe, John Lewis, Chadwick Boseman, this pandemic, the racial tensions, just been a crazy year. But when I look at the life of Chadwick Boseman, one thing that we just have to remember, just as people, that you got to be very careful what you say about people. You don't know what's going on in their life. A few months back, there were a lot of people mocking him, talking about his weight loss. They don't know what's going on, and only to find out that he's been battling stage 4 cancer. And so you got to be very careful not to judge people, especially if you've not walked a mile in their shoes, because here was this guy was struggling with this thing for 4 years. But whenever he did an interview, he had a big smile on his face. You would never know that he was fighting for his life. There was one interview he did many years ago. They were saying about how he's bulked up and he slimmed down. He bulked up and slimmed down. And basically he said, listen, hopefully I'll tell you my story if I live through it. And so, he was just basically being cryptic, letting us know that he was struggling with something and we did not know. And so that's why we've got to support one another and not tear down. But looking at Chadwick and what he went through with cancer, that's why it's very important, especially in African American community, minorities, that we have to get our health checks, just period, with anybody. Here it was, he suffered from colon cancer. And a lot of times they tell you to get a colonoscopy at age 50, right? And so especially if you have cancer in your family, you have to go to the doctor. You need to get the checkup. You need to get a colonoscopy early if colon cancer is in your family, because this is a serious issue. The Bible tells us that God wants us to prosper and to be in good health. And so this is very key. And so I guess I want to throw that out there to us, if we could kind of talk about this, the impact of the passing of Chadwick. How does this relate to caring for our health? I mean, where do you stand on that, Pastor Sai?
I believe personally, self-care is the best care. And I think I take it from the Gospels when Jesus is talking to his followers, and, he's really trying to hit it home. I don't know if people see this text in this way, but he tells them to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul. But love your neighbor as you do yourself. And I really, really take that text to home, just because how can I give my best if I'm not my best? And I have to take care of myself, because no one else can take care of me like I can. Obviously, there are healthcare professionals, there's family, friends, but I have to be able to be aware of those signs of when I'm tired. I have to be aware of maybe the different changes that are happening with my physical shape, my physical health, my mental health. That's very, very key. It's very, very vital, just because, oftentimes I'm a work bee. I work. And, my friends, my family, they'll look at me and say, well, how do you do it? Because, I have to find times. I've learned to work this routine and have a rhythm to kind of find a pause during the day where I can just just take a moment for myself, because if I didn't, then I wouldn't make it till Saturday. So I implemented that practice a little early on in ministry, just because there are just so many demands that come with my role as a pastor. And I realized that I cannot be all things to all men. And as much as I want to serve in every capacity. But if I don't take care of myself, then I would hate to, be in a position where I could have noticed some of the signs of the things that have happened to me, because I've been in a place where I've worked, I've worked hard, and I've been, sick. Like maybe it's like a very bad cold or something to that effect. And it's not good, you know, to run your body down and not take care of yourself. So that's why I always stress to people, take time to love yourself, you know, take time to find a hobby to get lost in so that you can recharge, you can refresh. There's something called compassion fatigue. So it's this idea where those individuals who are in helping professions, where we'll spend so much time giving of ourselves, where the moment that we start to feel like, you know, anxious or agitated or, you know, down, when we're helping people that we've been called to serve, it's time to take a step back. Just because, you know, we shouldn't be short with people that we love to care about. We should not be treating them mean in any way. But we're supposed to express our compassion at all levels. So those are just some things that I've done my best to be familiar with and to implement within my ministry and within my own personal life.
Thank you for that. Elder Tracy, again, with the passing of Chadwick Boseman, what can we learn relating to the caring for our health?
I think one of the things that we have to do, you know, within our community, we have good reason to not trust medical or healthcare professionals. And even during this pandemic, we see there's a huge disparity where the minority has a majority of the cases and majority of the actual passing from this virus. And what marvels me is the fact that you have the opposite side saying there is no virus, it's not that serious, this is all just liberal fake news, whatever it may be. And they're not suffering from it the same way we're suffering from it. So it leads me to believe that there's something that's going on that we're just missing. And much of what we've seen is that the individuals who are predisposed, that have perhaps diabetes, heart disease, and other illnesses are more susceptible to succumbing to the coronavirus. And so I think one of the things we have to make sure, and I implore all people to do, is get regular checkups as much as possible. I know that everyone doesn't have insurance, but if at all possible, get checkups. And don't just get the checkups where they check your lungs, listen to your heartbeat, and check your blood pressure. Get lab work done, get your blood drawn, have them run the tests, and don't just get the basic stuff. Don't just have them run the basic, check your kidneys with respect to your urine specimen, have them, check your cholesterol and your diabetes, but have them go a little bit deeper. For men, have them do a PSA panel, even if you haven't reached the age of 50, even if you haven't reached the age where you think that even matters anymore. Have them run PSA levels, have them do your hemoglobin checks, have them just check to see how your blood is functioning in your body. You'd be surprised at the little telltales that there are with your body, with your organ function, that can give indications that there is something else going on with your body. Perhaps there are some markers to watch and to look out for. Eye health. One of the things that really blew my mind was to find out that glaucoma is more prevalent in Blacks than it is in our counterparts. And that's troublesome. But the truth of the matter is, it's one of those silent diseases that you don't know about until it's too late. Getting a checkup, even with your eyes, and making sure that, any eye disease or disorders, having those things checked, and having our children checked as well. Prenatal care is very important. A lot of times we, because of our situation, we don't get a chance to actually have the proper prenatal care. And so a lot of mothers are carrying children, not getting prenatal vitamins, they're not getting checkups, things of that nature, and the children are born. And oftentimes there are some things that could have been prevented. And that's just a disenfranchisement in our communities. So we have to become more aware. And I'm not suggesting that all medicine is great medicine. I truly believe in trying to do as many things as we can through natural living, through proper diet, exercise, rest, as Pastor Sai was bringing out earlier. But I think you also need to have a proper diagnosis to where you are before you start self-medicating. And there's sometimes you won't be able to self-medicate. You're going to need the traditional synthetic medicine to help get yourself where you need to be, while you also get the other things in your life calibrated. So definitely believe in getting checked up. I know that we have a huge distrust, and I get it. But I'll tell you this, one of the things I recognize, I was watching a special some months ago, and there is a huge disparity in pain medication that is administered to women giving birth based upon race. And there is also a huge disparity in the amount of women of color that die giving birth or develop blood clots and things of that nature than there are of their white counterparts. And the reason for that is oftentimes when you are delivering, the mindset is they can take the pain, and they're still treating us as though we are subhuman. It is time to stop. I remember, just being there. My wife gave birth to our children. It's very important that you have someone else in the room, someone who can oversee, someone they know is interested, someone they know is watching, and not just taking everything that's being told to you as being accurate and true. Doing your research, going to the classes ahead of time, learning some of the things that will occur, because a lot of times things are just thrusted upon us and we just accept what the doctors say. And even now they have changed some of the criteria that is necessary for individuals to return to work or return back to their regular way of living, because they're not requiring people to get the second test to see whether they're actually testing negative for the coronavirus. So they're saying pretty much if you wait the 14 days, you can return back as normal. But I've heard countless cases where individuals after 14 days are still testing positive. So you're putting them back into their homes, back into their jobs, back into the stream of just commerce, if you will, and they can possibly expose themselves to others and infect them. But we have to start demanding more. And many individuals, when they first felt sick, a lot of people were getting turned around from their doctors because you could not get a COVID-19 test without first having your doctor refer you for one. And many Black people, we just sometimes take what we're being told and not impose our will. And the truth of the matter is many of these physicians are not making money in their practice from their white counterparts. Many Black individuals who don't have private doctors, who are going to these doctors who accept insurance or Medicaid or Medicare, that's how they're getting their funding. Demand more from your healthcare professional. Demand more. Do the research, speak to other people, and start demanding more. We have to stand up for ourselves because no one else will. And I saw this sign one day in Whole Foods that says, treat yourself as though you love yourself. And we just have to take care of ourselves better in that regard. I'm not suggesting anyone go to Whole Foods. We have an issue with them right now, okay? Just letting you know.
Good stuff, good stuff. And that's the thing that we have to understand, is that our bodies are a temple of God, and we have to treat it with respect. And so often we think to be in good health, we need to run a number of miles, we need to have a gym membership, we need to play sports. But good health is so much more than just physical exercise, because you could be physically fit, but of course you could be going through it. And there's a lot of mental stress. There's spiritual stress. There's so many ways that we need to try to take care of ourselves and detoxify our lives. So some of us, we have individuals and friends and family members in our life that are just bringing us down mentally. And what we have to understand when it comes to cancer, there are many ways people can get cancer. Of course, you can get it just from genetics being passed down. You can be a vegetarian. You could be a vegetarian. You could be a vegan, and you can still get cancer. My mother, praise the Lord, she is a cancer survivor, but she was diagnosed with cancer in 2017. She was able to beat it, but she was a vegan, and she got cancer because unfortunately it's in the family. And so there are different ways that you can get cancer. Stress can cause cancer. Being in contact with toxic substances can cause cancer. There's a big thing now, lawsuit on Roundup, a weed killer, because it caused cancer. Zantac, indigestion pill, it caused cancer. And so toxic substances can cause cancer. And then what we eat can cause cancer. Unfortunately, meat products, it can cause cancer. There's substances that are not even in meat products that people are putting in our foods that cause cancer. And so you have to treat your body with respect. You've got to go to the doctor, get checkups. Please, this is something that you have to do. But I believe Elder Tracy and Pastor Sai, you alluded to this. We know that it's important to get health checkups. We know it's important that we go to the doctor. But I want to ask the question, why is it that minorities have such a distrust for the healthcare system, Pastor Sai?
Well, I mean, history tells us, there have been many studies that have been done. One, the syphilis study, Another, Elder Tracy alluded to it, where there are so many disparities for Black mothers who have gone to the hospital to give birth. And there was a recent report where this woman, she died, she passed away because she wasn't given the proper care. Many would guess and assume that it's because of the color of her skin. And, many times that is the case. And when people hear those stories, there's a fear, there's an anxiety. The syphilis study happened many, many years ago, and those stories are passed down to tell people you got to be careful. Going to this doctor and going to that doctor, we're treated as numbers sometimes, numbers to fill a roster to get, those kickbacks for these medical institutions to get paid. And when that is a part of the narrative, then I don't think people are going to want to willingly put themselves into that situation. But then there's another reality. It's having access to healthcare. Many Black and brown communities don't have access to healthcare because many don't have insurance. And, and that's a sad reality for many people where, for them to go and to get those labs that, Elder Tracy spoke of, you would have to have some copays to go behind that. And I'm not in the insurance business to know what that may look like, but that's a reality that some people, they go for so long and they go undetected. They look good, they talk good, they look like they're in shape, but as we've seen in Chadwick Boseman, that may not be the case. We don't know what people are going through. And he actually was, he got checked and he found out that he had cancer. But the reality is sometimes people are presenting with looking fine, but they're not. And, and that's one of the challenges that we as Black people face. It's just that generational narrative that we have experienced personally from the doctor. Have a relative who went to the dentist, and it was during COVID times. And they went into a certain area that spoke a certain language that wasn't their native language. And they mistreated that person because of the color of their skin. And we're talking about a dentist that is there to do work. So if I can't trust you to admit me properly, why am I going to trust you to do a procedure that is very, that's between life and death? And that's a reality that we face. It's also that access, not many people can just walk in and just say, hey, I need these labs. Maybe they can demand them or, request them. But then, it's all about how they go about treating it with having the finances as well. So that's another caveat that we put into the pot. So that's why many people, they lack getting annual checkups. And then it's just that personal fear of not wanting to know what's happening. Somebody may say, hey, I just got a cough, but you've had that cough for about 5 weeks now. And just throwing it back, and saying, I'll get it checked on, I'll get it checked on, I'll get it checked on, to only learn that was something more severe. And again, Elder Tracy alluded to this. There's some things that you have to go and get checked out, especially if, common things are not working. If the echinacea is not working, if the ginger and the lemon is not working, and all of these are, God, nature. These are things that God created in nature, these herbs and stuff like that. But by, a certain time when you don't see improvements, definitely, have in mind to keep your healthcare provider in the loop. But, those are things to consider, like, to continuously go and to get checked up. And then also mental health, mental health is a big thing. It's just that constant denial. So I believe if we're able to identify what those barriers and risk factors are, then it can help to alleviate people to say, okay, here are some interventions, or here's some things that we can do to kind of release that burden for you to make that first step into going to get checked up the way that you may need to get checked up.
Thank you for that. Elder Tracy, how does the health disparities impact members of minority and low income communities when we look at it?
The issue I think we oftentimes have, if you go to a supermarket, I'll use Publix as an example. If I go into Publix, depending on what area I go to, I'll find they have a full-blown DreamWise section in Publix. If I go to the one in Boca, for example, if I go to one in Gardens, you can walk in and there's a full DreamWise section of Publix brand or organic foods you've never seen before, the Publix in certain areas. And the ideology behind that is those areas care more about their health because they can afford to than the other areas. And so what's troublesome is the same way you can view a grocery store, the same way you have to kind of view your healthcare practitioners. When they cater to a certain area, they recognize that in their mind, you don't really care. So we can kind of treat you any old way. And I remember I had to run a student nurse out of my wife's room when she was giving birth to one of our sons, because this is not time for practice. You want to practice? Go practice on someone else. Don't practice on my family. Don't practice on my wife. And I ran them out and they were hot mad. But the problem is you have to recognize that you have I'm paying for this. I'm not paying for a student nurse. Bring the doctor. And so we oftentimes have an issue with, oh, they need to get training. Well, then train them on someone else. Train them on the other kind, because I don't see them going in those rooms. And we have to take some ownership as it relates to our health and our well-being. The physicians who are treating us, if we as a people would start to demand more, they have to provide more. And I'll say this, I have been very intentional about finding Black physicians and healthcare professionals to serve my family as well as me. And I'll tell you why. It's not because I have I'll just tell you the reason why. I feel as though I can trust that conversation more. It comes, number one, from wanting to be able to help and give back to another practitioner who's working up their practice. But at the same time, I don't feel as though I'm dealing with that level of prejudice or racist or hate that I'm dealing with, potentially dealing with on the other side. And so I can sit down without having that level of pretense in the place and actually have a diagnostic or whatever being done and being, told the truth in that regard. And so it was another colleague of mine who gave me a laundry list of tests that he has done. And I've never seen that extensive amount of lab work that someone gets on an annual checkup. And I've seen, lab work that you get from a blood specialist or someone along those lines. And the things that he had this individual going through, for an example, and I'll just give this one example. For the PSA panel he has, there's like 3 or 4 different tests they run when they draw his blood to determine where he ranks with those numbers. Typically, if you go to the doctor and you're over a certain age for your insurance to cover it, it's one test for the PSA and one number. And so what I'm getting at is there are things that can be done. We just have to start demanding it. And in the low income communities, in those different areas, I think it's incumbent upon us to help us. And so we need to start getting the word out, working with one another, getting that information out. And it starts, I think, through the churches.
It's a good point. Good point. My wife is a nurse practitioner, and it's very interesting. Maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, when she was working at a doctor's office, she saw an African-American woman who was roughly 65 years old at the time. And this woman told my wife this was the first time she's been to the doctor. I think that was 2015, since 1980. And so when she was giving birth to her child. And of course, the problem is that, of course, with some minorities, they can't afford to go to the doctor. They can't afford to pay health insurance. What we have to understand, of course, minorities have high levels of diabetes, another number of individuals with cancer, high blood pressure. But the problem is with these individuals who are coming from low income communities, they're struggling just to pay rent. They can't afford to buy organic vegetables and fruits. Some of them can't even afford to buy just regular fruits and vegetables. It's cheaper, unfortunately, how this world has set it up, to eat unhealthy. And this is the problem sometimes why a lot of minorities suffer from diabetes, from high blood pressure. They have all of these health issues, and it's not just simply genetics. I know that it's a big thing right now with the pandemic. Why are minorities just so they're being riddled with this pandemic more than our white brothers and sisters. And it's because of social economic issues. All right. Of course, it comes, I believe it is with our Latin brothers and sisters. They have a higher rate of contracting COVID. But what's happening is with some of these families, they can't social distance. If somebody in their family has contracted COVID-19, they can't just take one section of the house to themselves and self-isolate, because for some of us, we're sharing a home with 7, 8, 10 people. And what normally happens is that it will be passed around. And so there are social economic issues why minorities have health issues. And this is unfortunately the world that we live in. I know a number of healthcare providers. I know a number of medical professionals, and I'm related to some medical professionals. And some of the things that they say is that racism is just a systematic thing. It's even in the healthcare system, that when minorities come to the hospital, and when our white brothers and sisters come to the hospital, if they're ailing, they'll do every test in the book for our white brothers and sisters. But when it comes to our minorities, they just want to put a Band-Aid on them and then send them right out. And so there are issues that we are dealing with. And unfortunately, these are the times that we are living in. But I want to try to switch and pivot our conversation if we can, because, the CDC, they've just been giving us a lot of misinformation. There have been a lot of so-called experts out there talking to us about this coronavirus and saying, okay, there's some individuals say that if you get it, you can't get it again. But of course, they were just reporting this week of a reinfection case of someone being reinfected with the coronavirus. They got it one time and they had a very mild case of the coronavirus, but unfortunately they got it a second time and they had a very severe case. And so I want to talk about that. What are your thoughts on the coronavirus and now a reinfection case? Pastor Sai, what's your take?
It's scary. Just thinking about the idea that a person can go through, experiencing the symptoms of COVID, and to think that they have an all clear, and to get reinfected with this virus. I've seen so many different facets of it. You have individuals who have extreme cases where they have to be admitted to the hospital and hooked to ventilators because they can't breathe. You have a series of people that they lose their taste, their smell, and just different symptoms that people experience. And I think about the mental health of the individual. To go through the first phase is traumatic alone. And then to be reinfected, it's just so much that's being stacked on this person, just because, take it, for example, maybe someone working at the Postal Service, this person may work at the Postal Service and they test positive, and okay, it's 14 days that you have to be out. And then you have to get your first reading, you have to get your second reading. And as Elder Tracy shared earlier, sometimes those tests, and from, what I've read and what I've seen, is that they'll come back positive, and I just think about that and say, man, that's frustrating. And the biggest frustration is that no one really has definitive answers, and we don't know how long this is going to last. And many people, I know, we are all frustrated because it has lasted longer than we wanted it to even last. We thought this was going to be something that it was going to blow over by the end of July, but here we are, almost into September. We're almost into September. And now we're talking about reinfection. And then we haven't even seen what it would look like in our country during the winter season. So that's enough to get a person that has been stuck in the home since March. That's enough to send anxiety through the roof. And for the person that's reinfected, my heart goes out to them, because we haven't even started, the mass phases of maybe a phase 1 of giving the vaccine. And there's some people of the belief, I'm not taking a vaccine. And some people are ready to take a vaccine because they want this to blow over. You have some people that are tired of wearing the mask, and you have some people that will wear the mask. So there are so many things that are happening, and it's just as a people, we're growing frustrated just because we love answers. We want to know what's happening and how we can prevent it, how we can protect our family, how we can protect our children who are going back into school. And it just tells us that the scientists, they're doing their best to bring out these reports, but even with their best efforts, we don't have the answers and the information that we need to even understand what COVID-19 is. There was one report that says that, yes, it's airborne, where people, you touch surfaces from infected people, you can contract it. But then there's other research that's been done that says that it's been airborne. So now, you stack that on top of everything. You're like, well, wait, are they spraying at night? Are they spraying during the day? Like, what's happening? And it really has to keep our minds, really, really, really grounded, to not, we have to protect our minds. I would say this. We have to protect our minds, yes, from all of the news that we see, but, just be super cautious out there. And if a person has overcome the first time, treat it like, treat this like it's, you can get contracted with COVID. Just be very diligent and do the best that you can.
Elder Tracy, thoughts on the coronavirus?
Pastor Sai hit the majority of the points. I think everything she said is just spot on. What's troublesome to me is the idea that they are so concerned about numbers in this state that they have now relegated the reporting to the Health and Human Services arm of the federal government, as opposed to the CDC, and having it go through our state, so that we make it seem as though the numbers are going down. And then at the same time, we have this idea of, well, what about convalescent plasma treatment? So we can take an individual who has recovered from coronavirus, they have been 2 weeks clear of the virus, and then they will extract the plasma, the liquid part of the blood, and use that because they say it had antibodies in order to help a person who's suffering from coronavirus to fight it. But now you have a report of someone getting reinfected. So if in fact they had the antibodies in their system that you're going to use to treat someone else who has the virus, I think it was Carla who just posted a statement that said they just don't know what the virus is. And it's clear, it's a completely unknown idea what a virus is. What's unfortunate right now is that we have a virus that no one knows what's going on, and we are in an election year. So what happens is the information we're getting is completely tainted, and we're not getting full information. And they want to keep blaming China. You can blame China all you want, but at this point, it's on the American shore. And so we have to take some ownership of what needs to be done next. And so for someone to get reinfected, I can't imagine the type of trauma that placed on an individual's body, because you already know the organs are adversely affected from being infected from this virus one go around. What says going around again? There's brain injury, there's heart issues, and other organ issues that happen. And so neurologically, there are impacts from it. And just to speak to one last point, there was a little girl who was exhibiting symptoms of coronavirus, and her parents brought her to the hospital. They told them it's okay, you can bring her back home, and they brought her back home, and the next day she died. She was never tested for the coronavirus. Another little boy, he was exhibiting some other type of symptoms. It wasn't actually directly linked to coronavirus, but he had some inflammatory issues going on in his body. They admitted him into the hospital, and he was there for quite some time. Never heard the end of that story as far as if he's released or still in the hospital, but he's receiving treatment. And he was tested for coronavirus. He found out he was exposed and that it had a different type of effect on him because, again, he was a child. The only difference between these two children, the girl was black, the boy was white.
Yeah, these are definitely strange certain times that we're living in. The so-called experts, they don't know. They don't know anything about this virus. And that's why it's very important. We've been stressing this for weeks, that you be safe, you wear masks, that you wash your hands, that you practice social distancing. You know, I've heard it before that, one person told me, well, I have a strong immune system. I exercise. This coronavirus is not going to affect me. And while that may be true, you can be asymptomatic and you can pass it on to somebody, and that could be tragic to that individual. They may die from it. And so we are our brothers and sisters keeper. And so please be safe. Please be safe, because we don't know anything about this virus. They say one thing, and then after tests, they come back and say another thing. And so the most important thing is that we try to be safe. All right. Got to turn and pivot this conversation into we're going to talk about some rough stuff, because of course this week started out really bad. And we want to talk about what took place in Wisconsin, want to talk about what took place with Jacob Blake and the shooting. And I want to, of course, ask Pastor Cy, what are your thoughts? I mean, after all of the marches, the protests, politicians speaking up, actors speaking up, we still have this issue. But what are your thoughts?
I mean, it's never ending. I honestly, after reading the headline, I couldn't read any further, just because I'm at this point now where it's like it's beginning to become even more harder, much harder to read those headlines, to read the stories. I can't even bring myself to watch the videos because of, what it would do to me emotionally, of just, a man trying to break up a fight, and, he's, the police come, and what could have been just something simple of, getting a better understanding of what is happening, even to the point, I read that he was handcuffed to the hospital bed and they took the handcuffs off. I'm like, where does it end? Where does it end? And when does it end? And, I was happy to see that we did this historic march on Washington, but it's like, we continuously do the marches. We continuously, speak. We use our voices. Many people are funneling money to these different causes, but we don't see a change because, whether it's one day in Wisconsin, it's somewhere in Mississippi. If it's not in Mississippi, it happens down here in South Florida. If it's not in South Florida, it goes back to the West Coast. So it's like, playing hopscotch around the US. And it's just, frustrating. I would say right now that I've had to take a mental pause. And I think last night hearing the news of Chadwick Boseman really it was like the straw that broke the camel's back, in a sense, just because it's like, we can't win. There's nothing that we can do. There's nothing that we can say right now that is putting us in, this position of moving forward. It's like we take one step forward to take a couple steps back, and everyone is attuned to what's happening in society. And I would dare to say those officers are as well. So it's just the hardening of the heart. It's, what, prophecy is telling us, that many people's hearts will wax cold. And that's what I see when I see this. I always take it to a spiritual realm just because it helps to kind of give me hope of what's to come. But the reality is people are still suffering. I want to quote, prophecy all day long, but the reality is people are still suffering. People are still bleeding. People are still crying, and people still want justice. I want justice because that could have been my brother. That could have been my cousin. That could have been any person. That could have been my father. And yet my heart's just broken. And I just hope that it gets better with, these action steps that we'll be taking in society with different entities.
Elder Tracy, your thoughts on the shooting this week?
What has become abundantly clear to me, and Pastor Cy, you said everything, and I'm with you. The last statement you made, you started off by saying my heart is broken. I have seen, and then prior to that, Pastor Cy, you talked about mental health. I have seen more grown men cry than I have this summer than I have seen my entire life. No exaggeration. And when you watch a grown man shed tears, shaking, and it was a New York Mets baseball player after the boycott of the game they had with the Miami Marlins. And I don't know his name, and I apologize for that. It wasn't even important at the moment. He was crying. He wasn't even, you know what it was? He wasn't even crying, he was weeping. You know when you begin to weep? And when he got done, you know what he said? I'll be better tomorrow. This is no way to experience pain, to have to weep nationally and then say, I'll be better. No, you be better. How about you do better tomorrow? How about you try? Because what happens is we have these conversations and we go through these arguments, these conversations. And we had this argument back about Aurora, Colorado. You remember that? The mother was pulled out of her vehicle. Her children were handcuffed on the side of the road. And then what happens is nothing really comes of it. We talk about it. We're in an uproar. And then we transition up to this place called Kenosha, Wisconsin, which most of us haven't even heard of before this incident with Mr. Blake. And Mr. Blake is outside of his vehicle. And what the camera shot doesn't show you in the main video is that on the passenger side, by the rear door, where his children were sitting, they were beating him something serious and tasing him, and the taser wouldn't take. So by the time we see him in that main shot, walking in front of the vehicle and going to his side, they've already been doing all manner of things to him on the other side of the car. And that's why the officer at the Wendy's parking lot, I'm going back now in Atlanta, remember the officer in the Wendy's parking lot that shot the gentleman for, he was sleeping in his vehicle and he got out and they just couldn't best him. And at some point they start following him and they end up shooting him in the back, right? Fast forward, here we are in Wisconsin. This gentleman, Mr. Blake, is going to his car. He opens the door. You had ample opportunity to subdue, not shoot, subdue, apprehend, whatever you needed to do. You had ample opportunity. That is attempted murder, because what you end up doing is you wait until he opens the door, you grab him by the shirt. So you have him in some regard, and then you let loose 7 shots. 7 shots. It wasn't just one cop. It wasn't as though he was in fear of his life and they know what was going on. There were multiple police officers around the area. And there's 3 boys in the back. They have watched their father get beaten. They have now watched their father get shot. And you don't think they could feel that heat coming off each one of those gunshots that are being released? They sit in the back seat. And so what gets me is a country that has a party for 3 to 4 days straight. In the wake of this, a big time party, singing all manner of songs and using the Lord's name. And they feel empowered. Because the truth of the matter is, while I recognize that racism has never, ever gone away in this country, they have never felt as empowered as they do now since 1963. This country is empowered by this idea of supremacy. And as I look at Mr. Blake, paralyzed from the waist down, it is a miracle. Like, shouldn't he be dead 7 times over? And I'm not suggesting paralysis is a good way out. What I'm simply saying is he's in the bed, or we'll be talking about a killing of another unarmed black man, and then you handcuff a paralytic to the bed. And Pastor Si, I'm with you. God's not sleeping. God's watching. But I'll tell you one thing. I feel like it's time for one of those David Psalms and those David prayers. Why do the heathen rage and imagine such a vain? It's hard, man. It's hard. And I'll say, I listened to Jacob Blake's sister, and I heard her, and through her words, she said, I don't want your pity. I'm angry. You've been doing this to my family for a long time. She went back to Emmett Till and walked through. They are trying to not just erase the black person. They are trying to erase our hope. So Pastor Si, when you say your heart was broken, They're trying to break our spirit and take our hope because they recognize if we are hopeless, we won't fight, we won't get an education, and we'll dare not go in that house again. And the issue they really have in this country is the audacity to sit in that house, sleep in that bed that slaves built, that they claim they own. The issue in this country is, how dare you think you can go and be the commander-in-chief of this country? Let's make sure it never happens again. So when you hear them talk about make America great again, what they're simply saying is make sure that doesn't happen again. They're trying to take our hope. They're trying to take our fire. They're trying to snuff it out. But unfortunately, because mentally we don't even have the support we need, I'm like this baseball player this week who says, I'm weeping today, but I'll be all right tomorrow. I'm gonna keep on fighting tomorrow.
Yeah, the prayer is, even so come Lord Jesus. These are terrible times that we're living in. And it's a systemic problem. It is a major problem. And this is not something that just started this year or during, of course, Trump's presidency. This is an issue that has been facing minorities for years, for decades. And the only difference is, of course, smartphones. The only difference is we're able to capture this on video. And so these are difficult times that we're living in. And there was another shooting. It was done, unfortunately, by a 17-year-old boy, Kyle Rittenhouse. And what are your thoughts, Pastor Sai, with this shooting of the death of two protesters and of course, injuring others? What is your take on it?
I mean, it's like, where do you start? Do you start that he left Illinois to go to Wisconsin? I've lived in the Midwest and I've traveled through Wisconsin, Illinois, Michigan, in different parts of the Midwest. And, to make that trek, it's not an easy trek. You have to plan that trip out because, like you said, Kenosha, Wisconsin, who knows where that place is? I don't know that place, from Adam until this happened with Jacob Blake. So we see a young man, there's some reports that have called him a thug, just because, if we were to go to some of our urban areas, this kind of behavior would be labeled that in the media. One report in the media said, he was accused of, killing two people and harming one other. But the accusation, it's in broad daylight, it's recorded. So one, we can challenge the biasness of the media, but then his motivation behind what he did, it was to protect his community. So you would leave all the way from Illinois to protect a TJ Maxx. You would leave all the way from Illinois to protect a Chipotle. It's more than that. It's more than just protecting, the community. It's what he's fueled by. So we see that this young man has attended the rallies of Trump. We see that this young man advocates for Blue Lives Matter. So it tells me that, he was primed and pumped through a Facebook group to agitate and to, stir him up to leave his comfort of his home in order to do this heinous thing to innocent bystanders that are just walking in the name of justice, walking for peace. And my heart is, it's troubled because I can only see that this is something that can trigger more young people to do this. Just why? Because they've been in the house since March. So they have more time to play Call of Duty. That looked like a scene from Call of Duty. If anyone is familiar with the game Call of Duty, you can play it on Xbox or PlayStation. And I would say I've played it in my youth. I played it, and it's not a game that, I'm a novice, but in order to shoot with that kind of precision, you would have had to practice. And another thing, to have access to a firearm. So I read a report that his mother drove him there. So what kind of example are we setting before our children, that a mother would load up her car with her son with a firearm that he's not even legally supposed to carry, and take him past county line, city line, state line, in order to what? Show people up, to protect a community that you don't even live in. So I mean, there's more to say about this. Again, I'm troubled because I hope that no one else gets an idea to do this, but let this have been someone of a different complexion. I saw a video on, social media where there was an agitator in Washington, D.C. who was apprehended for trying to do something similar, not as crazy as this young man, Kyle Rittenhouse. And there was a black man that he struck him, or he punched him. Let me just say that he punched him. And the cops, they chased after this man. I'm not there to say, that was right what this black man did. No, wrong is wrong. But all I'm saying is what that look like if a black man living on this day, August the 29th, 2020, at this hour of 7:32, were to go into a place where he saw his people that was marginalized, saw his people that was broke, that was hurt. And mind you, there are a lot of black people, there are a lot of people watching, sitting back. And, we are agitated, we are frustrated, we are angry, but we exercise our right to protest. And, the story would just be different. And on that, the story would be different. We will be having another hashtag after another black man or another black woman.
Elder Tracy, your thoughts on Kyle Rittenhouse?
Bury me in the ocean with my ancestors that jumped from ships because they knew that death was better than bondage. See, the problem I have is my generation, we don't trust the police because we've had interaction with them. But the generation of Jacob Blake's children who saw what happened to their father, the generation that witnessed George Floyd's death, they're going to turn into a killmonger where they'll hate the police. Not trusting and hating. And we literally have this guy, Dylan Roof, who in 2015 goes to an AME church in South Carolina for Bible study, sits down next to them and waits for prayer and opens fire and kills nine people in the church. White supremacist, self-proclaimed, and he's still alive, pled guilty to all charges, and his gumption or his motivation was based upon the same type of motivation you see with this guy here, this child, the 17-year-old child. His mother was not charged. And I'm just baffled because you don't charge the mother, but when there was a shooting at Post nightclub, the wife of the shooter was charged because she had information, she knew. So didn't the mother know when she was driving from Illinois with the assault rifle in her child what was getting ready to happen? No charges. But what's even more disgusting is that a Christian, or I'm going to use air quotes on this, a Christian group has raised over $100,000 for Kyle's defense. Okay. They threw a party this week. People are saying he should be the next president. The 17-year-old murderer. The same 17-year-old that when cops saw him on the street, driving by him, they drove by him. He had his hands in the air, an automatic weapon across his chest. They drove by him, one after the other. It wasn't a mistake by one after the other. They drove by him to the point where he was able to go back home that day, right? And get arrested back in Illinois. What really gets me is I watch my local news the next day because I want to find out what happened. Because I'm hearing all these stories. I want to find out what happened. As I'm watching my local news, the main story I've heard about 3 times on the same broadcast, the same 30-minute segment. Gene Alexander, NFL football player whose dad went missing, caught a battery charge because he went to go beat up the guy who was with last. That's the best news you have? A 17-year-old has killed 2 people, maimed another. And you want to tell me about a football player whose dad's missing and he went to go get some answers? I'm just troubled to know John Lewis, all the marching, all the sit-ins, he died in this climate. It's troublesome to know that when you look at someone like Chadwick Boseman, who went to an HBCU and did all this work and then stars in a movie that he knows end up giving people hope. People don't like when you typecast them. So when they typically see you beyond the movie, they don't like when you come up to them and do the whole Wakanda forever, say anything. But he kept with it. He kept with it because he understood it gave some semblance of hope in the middle of a dire time. And he kept doing that, knowing he was suffering from a terminal disease, knowing that his time was limited, but kept pushing forward and trying to advocate for that. And it's unfortunate they died in this climate. And so I don't know if it gets any better. But what I do know is we are setting up a country that literally the children will have no faith in the system that we advocate internationally. And that is home of the brave and land of the free. Really? We have gone taking a further slide backwards, because now we tell people you can go out and shoot and kill as many of them as you want. We'll pay for your defense. And we call ourselves Christians. The last thing I want to say is this. I love this message. I'm not going anywhere. But I know there are individuals who watched this thing this week, this party they had this week, the party in the midst of all this killing, all this chaos. And you watch the one person that looks like one of us, the neurosurgeon, who was not given the label of a surgeon general or anything of that nature. No, he was put in charge of HUD. But he gets up, and my Bible tells me the heart of man is deceitfully wicked above all things. But he gets up, and his slow of speech self says, this man, Agent Orange, has a good heart. That's the words that Danny Shelton said. He's our modern day Daniel. I am troubled to know that the devil is causing individuals to have clouded judgment when it comes to what's right and what's just wrong. They are willing to align themselves for the sake of political gain. And so the message is clean, but there are those who are perverting this message in the name of Christianity. It's a Christian group that has raised over $100,000 for a vigilante domestic terrorist. Another guy was down in Boynton Beach who had some pipe bombs that he put together, and they ended up arresting him a few weeks ago. You don't see them on the news much. Real quick snapshots and they're done. But a football player whose dad goes missing, and he grabs a person who left his dad out there in the middle of a swamp area and shakes him up to ask him, where's his father? That's what makes news in the same segment about 2 to 3 times. I'm not shocked. I'm just done.
Yes, it's really sad that we villainize Jacob Blake, and then we try to humanize Kyle Rittenhouse. And this is the country that we live in. These are the times that we live in. But time is running out. I do want to try to touch on, because of the shooting of Blake, we saw the NBA, the players, they had a boycott. And very quickly, Pastor Sai, what's your thoughts on that?
I mean, it's very historic. It started with the MLB, NBA, and WNBA as well. We saw tennis players. It was like a chain reaction that happened across many major league sports. And I think it's just the beginning. It's just the beginning of players really, really taking their stand, because they came to that bubble with the purpose of wanting to speak out against racial injustice, and for them to be in the bubble and to see what's happening outside the bubble. You have to really wonder, what's this all about? What's the purpose of really playing if we can't even send a message across without, the world seeing, the world hearing? So I was really proud to see it. I'm a little saddened that it was short-lived, but hopefully there are more talks in the future for how to strategize situations like this. The whole, it was crazy because, many other teams, I think it was Milwaukee Bucks, took Orlando by surprise when they didn't come out, during warmups, when they didn't come for tip-off. And they were a little, like, hey, what's going off? And it wasn't like it was announced throughout, the leadership, but it was just players, really standing on what they believed in. And I'm a proud, sports watcher to see that happen in my day. And hopefully, it can really, really challenge more people to stand for what they believe in.
Elder Tracy, any thoughts?
Just very quickly, I think Chris Webber said it best that night. He said, we're in this bubble, this NBA bubble, because of the pandemic, but we actually live in a bubble every day because we have money. We are recognizable sports figures. But at the end of the day, he said there are times when he goes out, he doesn't have this fine suit on, and people don't necessarily know who he is, and he still gets followed around the store. And so I think one of the things that I applaud are the individuals who can stand up, even in the midst of their millions or billions, and recognize that, but for that, they are labeled and seen just as we are. And I think it was last week we talked about the fact that, I think it was Oprah Winfrey in Switzerland who was being questioned and tried based upon her ability to be able to afford a certain purse. But I too, as Pastor Sai said, I'm saddened that it was short-lived. I think that there was a powerful statement that was left to be made that has not been made. And I believe that they will pay to see you run. They'll pay to see you shoot, but they won't stand by you when you're being shot. And I think we as a people need to do a better job of standing together. Kenny Smith, hats off to him. He said some very powerful things, walked off the show. The other two that had the same skin color as him, they decided not to. And a lot of that comes from what are we going to do next? And it has to be clear about what we want. And I don't think it has to be clear about what you want. I think it has to be clear about what you don't want. You don't want shooting. I don't want to sit here and dribble and pass the ball like nothing's happening. Today is not a good day, just not a good day. And I need some time to clear my mind. And I need some time to be upset. And I think that's another thing as well. I need time to scream. I need time to be upset. I need time to just get this all out. Again, I'm going to go back to my Mets player who said he's weeping. I'll be better tomorrow. And so sometimes it's not a matter of having a well thought out 10-step program about why we're boycotting. We just need to boycott. Something's off here. Just keep dying. Something's off. And they're hailing this guy, and you say humanize him. I'll go one step further. They're heroizing him. They're literally causing him to become, that's their modern day hero for president. You kidding me? He kills black people. I'm undone, man.
So we have to wind this thing down. Again, we do want to encourage those of you who are watching that come November, you need to vote. You need to vote. I know that it is very discouraging to see what's going on in our country, but your vote can be your voice. And so please do what you have to do. You need to vote, get ballots, mail-in ballots. You just need to vote. You got to do something. I believe that we are living in the last days. This just been a crazy, crazy week. The shootings, senseless deaths, the fires in California, the hurricane in the Gulf Coast, locusts in Africa, typhoon in Asia. There was an earthquake earlier this month in North Carolina, earthquakes in diverse places. We're living in the last days, and I pray those of us who are watching that you allow these things to be an alarm clock, to wake you up, to realize that we need to make our calling and election sure in the Lord. And this is what we need to do definitely during these times. Of course, our thoughts and prayers go out to the Bozeman family. The passing of a great individual. Again, we want to encourage you. Don't judge. Just pray for people. If you don't have nothing positive to say about anybody, then just keep it to yourself. We never knew about his struggle. And I like, I think it was the gospel singer Zacardi Cortez. He has a song, "You Don't Know." You just don't know what I'm going through. And you never know what people are going through. And so that's why it's important that you hold your comment to yourself. But we're going to end with a word of prayer. And we're going to ask Pastor Sai if you could just close us out with prayer at this time.
Surely, our God of heaven, we thank you so much for bringing us together this evening to have these conversations. It was tough to get through some of them, but Lord, it's our reality until you come. So I pray that someone's heart was moved and stirred to go out and vote to make a difference. I pray that you comfort those that are mourning the loss of not only Chadwick Boseman, but maybe a loved one that they've lost during these COVID times. I pray, Lord, that you be with the people affected by the typhoons, the earthquakes, the hurricanes, God, the fires that are happening, even the unrest within our streets, within our world. And I pray that you would put your spirit in our hearts, God, so that we can be more hopeful of what's to come in you. We thank you. We love you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
All right. Thank you for watching us, and we will see you again next week. God bless.